I miss Vinland Saga. I know how crazy this statement sounds considering that the manga hasn't ended yet, so how could I miss this series already? Well, 3 weeks ago, a YouTuber by the name of Raz made a video on Game of Thrones about how he missed it. I'll link the video in the description, but in the video, Raz said something that resonated with me.
Getting to start Game of Thrones at the start and see how it grew was really cool.
It's only a few words, but I resonate with that feeling. That feeling of watching something grow, watching it go from good to amazing, watching characters change as a series progresses, and watching them develop as people. Frieren is the most recent example of this. We get to see this character go from a very cold and distant individual into a caring teacher and mother figure for Thorfinn. We see her learn to appreciate the time with the people she cares about because she didn't experience that before. Rudius, despite being one of the most despised anime protagonists in the medium, goes from a depressed gooner who spent his mother's funeral jacking off in his room to someone willing to risk his life to protect his new family when he gets a second chance. Vagabond, while not being one of my personal favorites, is a series where the main character Musashi goes on a journey to figure out what true strength is, or how he phrases it, to be invincible under the sun. But Musashi doesn't become invincible through becoming strong, but rather he finds peace by learning to exist in the present. Be aware of yourself and accept yourself as you are. That is where your training should begin. The thing that I enjoy about these series is how the authors of them show us every moment in the lives of their characters up to the moment that they truly change. For Vagabond readers, a lot of people might point you to the farmland arc. For Mushoku Tensei, it's at specific moments in the story, usually before or after a turning point occurs. With Frieren, it's right at the beginning of the story, but because of her remembering the moments she spent with Himmel's party, we are able to piece together why she ends up crying in the first episode. And in Vinland Saga, we see Thorfinn vow to become a true warrior by climbing out of his pit of despair and trying to become a kinder person that doesn't use violence as the first action he takes. But I don't want to talk about Thorfinn's growth, although I will bring it up much later. The thing I want to talk about is Thorfinn's regression. I'm gonna kill you! Vinland Saga is a story about a lot of things. It's a story about the impact of war, human depravity, the cyclic nature of violence, our place in the world, our own self-worth, our ability to change, the loss of identity, etc. etc. And while I would love to talk about these things in length, I'd have to talk about season 2 of Vinland Saga, and I don't want to talk about season 2. Not because I don't want to talk about it, but it's because I want to talk about the first season and how the first arc of the series impacts the rest of the series much later on. I've already spoken about my thoughts on season 2 in a video I did last year, so check that video out after this one when you are done watching it. I'm gonna put the spoiler warnings up on the screen now in case there are people who haven't watched Vinland Saga yet. I will be spoiling season 1 and some parts of season 2, and I do bring up the manga. I do ask that if you haven't watched it yet for you to go watch it and then come back to this video. But if you wanna watch this video because you're looking for an excuse to get into Vinland Saga, that's cool too. Hopefully I can convince you to give this series a chance.
Do you want a sword, Thorfinn? A sword is a tool meant to kill. Why do you need it? Whose life do you intend to take?
Enemies.
Your enemies? Who are they?
Vinland Saga is a story that touches on a lot of deep and heavy subject matter. Season 1 in particular focuses on the impact of war and the loss of a loved one on the main character Thorfinn. After Thorfinn watches his father be killed in front of him, he swears to kill the man responsible in hopes that it will avenge his father's honor. While on the surface this might seem like a noble goal, it's an excuse Thorfinn uses to chase revenge. I've been playing a lot of Assassin's Creed Valhalla recently, and I noticed that behavior like this was very common in Scandinavian culture. Anger is a very destructive emotion. It can cause us to say things we wouldn't normally say, do things we normally wouldn't do, lash out at people who care about us unfairly, and as adults we kind of have the mental and emotional understanding to process our anger and deal with our grief. Children aren't typically so lucky. Unless there is an adult there to help guide them to process their grief, those emotions can bottle up and become something toxic and unhealthy. Samuel Johnson quotes, "Life is but short. No time can be afforded but for the indulgence of real sorry. Or contests upon questions seriously momentous. Let us not throw away any of our days upon useless resentment, or contend who shall hold out longest in stubborn malignity. It is but not to be angry, and best in the next place to be quickly reconciled." The narrative crux of Vinland Saga Season 1 is anger, be that through Askeladd, Thorfinn, or Canute. But I think the most important aspects is how anger is used to explore other emotions in the first season, specifically grief. Season 1 of Vinland Saga displays this beautifully in the beginning with both Ylva and Thorfinn's reaction to their father's passing. When Thorfinn sees Thors get killed, he swears to kill Askeladd in kind to avenge his father. This leads him down a very dark path. The kind, innocent boy we see in the first 4 episodes, who seeks adventure and views going to war as an epic battle of villains and heroes, becomes a rage-fueled mass murderer, all for the sake of avenging his father's honor. Thorfinn betrays the trust of people who show him kindness, he kills without mercy, he shuts off any and all emotion, and he ends up becoming a slave to his own rage because of his desire to avenge his father. Ylva is much older than Thorfinn. Instead of being angry or bitter when she gets told by Leif that Thors was killed, she bottles up her emotion. She tries to pretend everything is okay by taking on the work that her father used to do. She puts on a mask in front of everyone and tries to do more work to drown out any sadness she's feeling. She puts on a mask in front of everyone and tries to do more work to drown out any sadness she's feeling. It's only until her mother stops her from her work that she's finally forced to feel and confront the emotions she's bottling up from both the loss of her father and not knowing where her brother is. I feel like Hild is a good representation of the type of person Ylva could have been had her mother not been there for her, to give her the chance to mourn and let out her emotions and help her understand the reasoning behind her father's passing. But she's a character that pops up way later in the story, and we're talking about the prologue. The main point of what I'm trying to say with this Ylva section is that Ylva, unlike Thorfinn, had her mother around to help her process her grief, unlike Thorfinn, who only had Askeladd and his crew. And because of this toxic environment and the toxic people he's surrounded by, Thorfinn grows up to become the worst version of himself. One thing I find that Vinland Saga does really well in terms of its writing is display how toxic environments have an adverse reaction to the growth of a person. Look at the real world, for example. A lot of our environments end up affecting the types of people we grow up to be. Whether you're a child still growing up or an adult who thinks that they understand who they are, we as people are constantly taking in things from what we surround ourselves by, and that affects us as people. I noticed it a lot when I was on Twitter or X or whatever Elon is calling it now, but I was so much more angry when I was on that app. I always strive to be a better person, but whenever I was on Twitter, I would just become so angry at the world. And I realized when I got off Twitter, because my brother told me to delete it off my phone, at how much I had let the negative things I saw on the app shape the person I was becoming. In the case of Thorfinn, the person who changed him for the worst was Askeladd.
Now that felt good.
Thorfinn's journey to kill Askeladd forces him to grow up quickly. Being surrounded by constant war and death would do that to any child, but with Thorfinn, it's a case of if he doesn't put up his arms and fight to defend himself, he'll die. Askeladd lets him tag along on his ship when he sees Thorfinn is old enough to fight. Unlike when he was just a child, he actually sees that he can use Thorfinn on the battlefield to do tasks he knows he or his crew can't do themselves, and all he has to do to get Thorfinn to do all this grunt work is give Thorfinn the opportunity to kill him as a reward. Thorfinn isn't part of Askeladd's crew. He never interacts with anyone in it because they are responsible for killing his father, so we never really see anyone form deep, meaningful bonds with him because they know what they did, and they know that if they did try to, Thorfinn would kill all of them one by one. The reason he doesn't go after all of them and just kill them in their sleep is because it's not the warrior code. The warrior code dictates he fights the leader to take out the man responsible for everything. If Thorfinn did kill all these soldiers in their sleep and just whittled down Askeladd's crew's strength little by little, it would be seen as cowardice, weak, unwarrior-like. That's not a war. Askeladd even comments on the fact that he views Thorfinn as a true warrior for sticking to his culture's traditions and pride. But as we see multiple times throughout the story, a lot of these characters don't care about honor or tradition, especially Askeladd. Thorfinn in season 1 lets his pride cloud his judgment. He allows his anger to control his actions, and because of this, he becomes another cog that perpetuates the cycle of violence, all because he didn't have anyone to help him process his trauma. Quote, "The paradox of trauma is that it has both the power to destroy and the power to transform and resurrect." I think Thorfinn's refusal to grow closer to anyone in Askeladd's crew also kind of speaks to the idea that men struggle with emotional intimacy. None of these Vikings know how to comfort a child. They only know how to repress their emotions and believe that a real warrior can only prove himself on the battlefield. Even Thor's years after being off the battlefield still finds it difficult to tell his wife, to tell his children that he loves them. So it would make sense that no one here knows how to comfort Thorfinn the way his mom comforts his sister when she breaks down. We all deal with grief differently. The reason I brought up having an adult or parental figure around when we deal with heavy emotions is because of how Askeladd uses Thorfinn's anger to turn Thorfinn into his slave. Instead of comforting Thorfinn the way a parent would, he turns Thorfinn into a warrior. Now for context, I don't mean slave in the actual sense of Thorfinn being Askeladd's property. It's just that Askeladd finds a way to weaponize Thorfinn's anger at him to make Thorfinn into his personal attack dog. It kind of builds a very toxic relationship between the both of them. Askeladd eventually becomes a sort of surrogate father figure to Thorfinn through this relationship built on hatred and rage. It's not healthy for either of these characters, but they don't have the luxury of sitting down and trying to have a civil conversation because of the built-up animosity Thorfinn has for Askeladd. Yes, Askeladd understands what he did, but he was paid to kill Thors because of Floki, not because of any hatred he had to Thors. Because of that lack of knowledge, Thorfinn's hatred has no place to go but to the person he saw give the order to have Thors killed with a barrage of arrows. I remember this moment in episode 8 where Askeladd and Thorfinn are having a duel, and Askeladd taunts Thorfinn by essentially calling Thors another casualty he happened to run into. And after he dislocates Thorfinn's arm, he asks Bjorn to pop it back into place. Askeladd doesn't take the chance to kill Thorfinn despite the fact that he could kill him immediately after dislocating his arm. He asks Bjorn to patch up Thorfinn because in his own sick, twisted way, he cares about him. Despite the fact that he was responsible for traumatizing this boy and filling him with so much anger, he gives Thorfinn tasks. He sends him out as a scout because he doesn't want Thorfinn to waste away waiting for a moment to kill him. He wants Thorfinn to get stronger, so Thorfinn is equipped to handle himself now that he's no longer in Iceland. His methods are just more toxic and unhealthy because they teach Thorfinn to become something he was never meant to be: a killer. These same methods only grow the resentment Thorfinn has for him, and because Thorfinn is too angry and too prideful to let go of his desire for revenge, he never tries to understand Askeladd as a person. And of course he would never want that. The bastard killed his father right in front of him. The point I'm spending forever trying to get to is when anger and trauma are left to fester, they only harm the person who is dealing with those emotions more and can become more difficult to eventually let go of. Quote, "Trauma is personal. It does not disappear if it is not validated. When it is ignored or invalidated, the silent screams continue internally, heard only by the one held captive. When someone enters pain and hears screams, healing can begin."
Stand by.
I can't speak on other people's experiences with these 4 simple words, but I can speak on my own. So here goes. When I first read Vinland Saga, I didn't really understand these words at the time. I just knew that they resonated within me in a way that I could never describe clear enough to get the point across. And going back and rewatching the anime, I think I understand the message that Makoto Yukimura wanted to get across. I know a lot of people in the anime and manga community don't like how Vinland Saga went from a story about fighting, war, death, and blood in the prologue to this more character-driven drama about the struggle to change and if we as people are capable of changing from the people we used to be. If you want a series just with cool fighting, just read Kingdom. Read Kingdom. Vinland Saga is never going to stop being what it currently is. Read Kingdom. Thorfinn in season 1 shows us the type of people we could become if we let anger and pride dictate our way of thinking. If we choose to hold on to our anger, resentment, and hatred to the world, we never grow. It's only after Askeladd is killed do we see how hollow and empty these emotions end up leaving us. Things like anger will do nothing for you in the long run but leave you as a hollowed out husk of a human being. That's why I feel like these words that Askeladd says to Thorfinn are so important before he dies at the end of season 1.
Tell me, how do you intend to live?
I stumbled across this video called Death is Sleep Being Shy by X1A, and I think about this video a lot because in it, X1A says,
if on a cosmic scale none of it matters, does that really fucking matter? We won't last forever, but while we're here, what a silly decision it would be to waste our day out in the cosmos.
And this sentence, along with Florence Pugh, is something that is constantly on my mind. The person you are now isn't the person you were yesterday. Every day can bring change if you let it. If none of it matters, then the anger that you feel now doesn't matter. So instead of living with these negative emotions, instead of blaming yourself for not being where you are or where you want to be, forgive yourself. It may take time, you will stumble, but that's okay. A single mistake will never define the person you are capable of becoming. That's the lesson I feel we can all take from Vinland Saga Season 1. Anger will only lead you down an even lonelier path and even lonelier life. Underneath all the death and carnage, underneath all the blood, guts, and anger, this is the lesson Vinland Saga Season 1 spends 25 episodes hammering into you, and Season 2 is the culmination and eventual payoff for all of this suffering we see Thorfinn go through. I've mainly been focusing on Season 1 in this video, but the reason I'm bringing up Season 2 is because Season 1 does such a beautiful job at displaying Thorfinn's anger, rage, and desire for revenge, and I wanted to highlight that this stage of life is important to look at first and address, because I feel like we've been at this stage in life in some way, shape, or form, where your mind is only dealing with these negative emotions. You are having a tough time processing. Everything that comes after in season 2 breaks Thorfinn's character down and allows him to be human again. It's a slow process, and the reason it's so slow is because Thorfinn is still processing everything that happened in season 1. Just like in real life, you are capable of change, and you are capable of letting go of your hatred. And that is the video. When I wrote the script, I'd written it around the time I was rewatching Vinland Saga season 1. That was 10 months ago. For a little backstory, I first watched the show 4 years ago, if I'm remembering correctly, and by episode 4 I had fallen in love with it, and I knew that my feelings would only go up from there. I haven't picked up the manga yet because I'm kind of just waiting for it to end so I can just read it and absorb everything all at once. It's probably gonna end in like 4 years. But the reason this video was made was actually because of a comment I saw on YouTube, and it was a comment on an English dub clip of the show where Thorfinn was screaming that he was going to kill all the mercenaries. So I just want to say thank you, random commenter, for making me talk about this. I always wanted to kind of analyze, stuff like this. I want to do more analytical type of content, stuff where I can look at characters, talk about them, why they are the way they are, their relationships with other characters in the series and stuff like that. I want to do that more. I just don't know how well it's going to perform, but beggars can't be choosers. I still want to talk about the stuff. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope if you're still here that you subscribe. I don't have any plugs again this week, just yeah. And thanks for like 5k subs, or 6k now, or 7k. I don't know whenever this video drops, but thank you for 6k subs. Like, I'm genuinely shocked that the last video performed so well. Just wow. Wow. I was not expecting this, so thank you. If you're new here, thank you for subscribing, thank you for enjoying my content, and I will see you in the next one.